Morning, I see you in the sunrise every morning. It's like a picture that you painted for me. A love letter in the sky. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, you are faithful and true. Nobody loves me like you. Sorry, I could have had a really different story, but you came down from heaven to restore me. Forever save my life. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, you are faithful and true. Nobody loves me like you. Mountains, you're breaking down the weight of all my mountains. Even when it feels like I'm surrounded, you never leave my side. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, I will worship you, forever worship you. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, you are faithful and true. Nobody loves me like you. Nobody loves me like you. Even when I cannot see, you are moving. Even when I cannot hear, you are singing over me. Even when I can't hold on, you won't let me go. You are faithful. You are faithful. Hallelujah. My soul will sing hallelujah. You are good to me. You are faithful. Always faithful. Even when my faith is tried, you're providing. Even though my flesh may fail, you're the strength when I am weak. Even when I run away, you will wanted, everything I needed.
Only you are holy. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Your Pathway Home. Today is August the 20th, 2023, and I'm Jason Schofield. And to my far left is Matthew Allen and Cody Pritt here next to me. And good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, we had a slight thing that I was taking care of there for technology-wise. Okay, we're good.
Well, good morning and welcome. We are so glad all of you are here. It is an absolutely beautiful August morning here in Dayton, Ohio. I went out a while ago over to the big building to take some stuff over there, and the sky is blue and the sun is shining and the birds are chirping, and it's a great day to come out and worship God with us at Cornerstone today.
You know, Matt, in Ohio, I absolutely love every season. We get 4 seasons here, and one of the things I love the most is fall, and I'm starting to taste and smell a little bit of fall because it's getting cool in the evening, a little cool in the morning, and I'm excited about it. And every time we have a change of season, I'm just reminded of God's wondrous works and how His very power is even exhibited in nature, and I love every bit of it. Well, we love having.
I do too.
We love having everybody here. There's several of you already tuned in with us, and Matt's going to introduce our topic that we're working with here for the month. I just want to take a minute and say, you know, some of you this summer have taken the opportunity to stop by in our Dayton Centerville area. We had a blessing to see Rose Steele just last week, a very loyal
3
listener.
hours to come up and come see us.
Yeah. And what a sweet lady this lady is, and
her husband, he's a great guy.
Really is.
Yeah.
A great group of people, and we hope that when you have the opportunity, we say this every week, that you will stop by and meet the Cornerstone family, because you know, this is a special place to be, and we want to share with God's people like this.
You know, we were talking before we went on the air, the 3 of us, and just kind of reflecting back over the summer. We have had just a great summer here. Wilson Adams and Josh Welch and Mark McCrary have been here. Chris Emerson. It's just been fantastic with the series on the family and that focus. And you know, guys, that topic is just so important. It's so needed today because there's a lot of people out there that are hurting and just going through a lot. And, you know, I think the thing as we preach and teach on this, one of the things I know that all of us have work to do all of us have got to work inside our families to make them better and more godly. And I hope that everyone has been encouraged in that way over the summer. We've tried to cover everything we could about the family, from your marriage to parenting to raising kids, and what happens when it doesn't work out, if your marriage ends, and how do you handle that, and how do you go forward. We've just tried to cover it from every possible angle to help as many people. And we want you to know that if you're looking for a congregation that cares for people, that will love you and reach out to you and help you through whatever you're going through in life, we feel strongly that this is the place for you to do that. And so we would welcome you to come out and be with us at Cornerstone. So,
well, Matt, that being said, I'm going to support you in that and say I think that the age of being insensitive and harsh and judgmental over people's circumstances, which they would have never designed or desired for themselves, it better be over. Because taking the position of Christ was one where he always approached these difficult situations with love and compassion. He still stood up for what was right. And he even said things like, go and sin no more. He pointed out their sin, but he approached them with love and compassion. And we need to jump on board with Jesus's way and stop this harsh approach that we have seen in the past. And, when we approach these difficult topics like this, it is not because we have all the answers.
Right.
Or because we have been perfect in our example as husbands or as fathers or as, Christians. But it's because we want to help everybody work through this together as the scriptures have designed.
And the other cool thing about this summer, Jason, is how we've been able to encourage Cody every Sunday, because every Sunday we get the rundown on how things are going with Tay and their baby and everything that's come along. And Cody is anticipating this big day more and more every hour. He talks more and more about it. He's excited.
Cody, I mean, and I want you to know, brother, we love you. We know this pregnancy's been very hard on you, and we're going to be here for you.
They tease me too much with this. I mean, not. It's not unwarranted. I am a little bit of a worrywart, so. But I get that from Dad, so I blame him. If you're watching, Dad, I blame you.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so guys, it's kind of a perfect way to really bring into what we want to talk about today. We've been talking about aiming for excellence during August, and last week we were in Philippians chapter 3, and we talked about pressing forward for the goal, for the prize of the upward calling of Christ Jesus. That's Philippians 3:14. We press on. We press ahead. We move forward. We strive for it. We want to be with Jesus when this life is over. In order to do that, we've got to walk away from our past and just focus on the Lord and have it as our supreme desire to get to know Christ and to know Him and to be with Him. This is what Paul's talking about earlier in that chapter. And so we want to kind of use last week as kind of a jumping off point for where we want to go today. And we were talking about, since we have had so much focus on our families over the last 3 months, we thought it'd be good today to just talk a little bit about how we raise the bar with how we work inside our families to make them as godly as they can be. Striving for excellence in the family. How do you do that? And the other thing I want us to kind of embed in this morning, gentlemen, is maybe somebody's out there listening or watching this morning that their family is not, and they know it. It's not where it needs to be. We want to weave into this some hope. No matter how far along you are in the process of raising your family, it's never too late to begin to instill godly principles and godly attitudes into your life and try to raise the bar.
Matt, can we all agree together that there's been a change in the family? I mean, and I understand dynamics change, perhaps because of culture or something, but there's really just been a change. And I think about the time when we were kids, you would never ever criticize somebody in your family, and your brother or something or your sister may drive you nuts, but if you seen somebody pick on them, you would stand up for them. You would absolutely never say anything against your parents, because there was a love and respect for your folks that was special and different and set aside and preserved. And now it's like you talk about somebody with their family and they almost become destructive in the adjectives that how they describe their parents or their brothers and sisters are very harsh and critical. And I wonder, what happened. I was in an era that my dad could always beat up your dad. I've never even, I've never seen your dad, but my dad, he was better. And I believed it in my heart, and it's not because my dad was super strong, but it was because I knew that there was nobody better than my dad, and that's the way I believed and felt, because I loved and respected him so much. And so what happened? And I'm not really sure, but to strive to get back to a family respect that I think, because it all begins with this family unit. We wonder why people don't have any respect for leadership in the church or any respect for leadership in our local governments or our nation. It's because I think it's kind of been started way down at the root of what happened when there was a breakdown in a family.
Well, what you said there, Jason, made me think of Ephesians 6. We're going to actually be in that passage later this morning, where Paul quotes a passage out of Exodus chapter 20. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. Honor them, all right? Hold them up in esteem. And we need to be helping train our children to understand that the fact they have parents that love them and care for them and are raising them, that is of extreme value. That's a blessing from God. Mm-hmm. And really we need to be kind of training young people to appreciate. I think it's one thing for parents to instill that in their children, but also I think those of us in the church, as we encourage each other, need to be instilling the value of parents and to hold them in high esteem and honor because of who they are and what they're trying to accomplish in raising their children, keeping those high principles in practice. And by the way, if we're going to do that, then parents need to be living and conducting themselves in a way that is honorable, so that the respect and all of that comes naturally for their child.
Yeah, so looks like we had audio issues. I'm working on that. I think we should be fine now, Kevin. But I totally agree. It even kind of pans out in statistics. If you look at the statistics of the most likelihood of being able to be successful, well-adjusted as you grow older and leave the home, is actually having two-parent households. And then having that mutual respect and love for one another, especially if something does, heaven forbid, happen to you, you can fall back on, your family's always there. Your mom and dad are always there, and as I'm becoming a father, I'm becoming more and more aware as my anxiety rises, as the baby is closing in on approach here for landing, and it really does take what do they call it, a village to raise a baby, because I don't know how Taylor and I would do it if it was just us, and let alone if it would have been only me or only Taylor. It would be amazing to see how the logistics would pan out for something like that. So, well,
I think, as we talk about aiming for spiritual excellence in our family, spiritual growth, aiming for a higher prize here, it has to do with incorporating in everything that we do the spiritual aspect, and understanding, if we're teaching our children about flowers and gardening, that those things came from God. That's God's works, and just every little thing. And so whether you're reading with your children or you're serving with your children, involving your children in that process, do things as a family a lot of the men that I've talked to that felt like, maybe if they would have to do it again, they might do it different. They said they went out preaching to different places. They were out visiting and stuff. And then they said their kids became teenagers and all of a sudden had no interest in the Lord. And they realized, well, I did my service. I was trying to set a good example, but then what I was doing is I didn't involve them. And I'm thinking, when we pray, we teach our children to pray. When we have time, we're spending our time doing godly things. When we set out values and standards, we set out and we make sure that it's clear these are not just standards of this family, but these are standards that God does. Worship should be a family thing. Tradition should be surrounded around spiritual things. Even having a night together as a family to build and to bond, are you incorporating spiritual things?
Yeah, I think this is one of the pressing issues of our day, and we've talked about this a lot over the course of the summer. You blink and you're through a year or two or three. And I used to hear this when I was 20 years ago, when I was both the kids were home and little, and I somebody'd tell me, oh, it's going to go by so fast, and oh, you just blink and they'll be grown, and and I'm like, yeah, okay, that did nothing for me back in the day, but now here it is on the other side, and now I'm that person telling the one that's coming up, look, you need to seize the moment and take advantage of it. And so you just listen to that is what I would encourage younger people. Heed that warning. You've got to invest time in them, and I think that is one of the things that is sorely lacking. And look, there's a lot of factors in this, okay? You could get into economics, and where both parents are having to work outside of the home to make ends meet. And I mean, look, I know a lot of people today that are having to do that, and it's not that they want to have an extra boat or an extra vacation house or whatever. It's just so they can live, because everything costs so much, and it forces that to happen. And so it's so easy as life is going on to have these things get in the way, and that's where the pressure comes.
Actually, Julie writes in saying that perhaps the exposure of what is going on in the home makes the appearance of the change rather than actually there being a change. So more of a just, we kind of know what's happening now. More and more are open about it, and I think this kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier in the program, Matt, saying that we want to sort of alleviate the worries of those who didn't grow up in the perfect family. Newsflash: I don't think anyone has grown up in a perfect family either. Every family has their problems, so no one's doomed. To being a non-Christian or being a bad person if they grew up in a bad family. Likewise, they're not completely cinched in for salvation if they grew up in a Christian home either. Man, I keep forgetting this dude's name. Chris Emerson. He actually talked about that. Not Joshua. Geez, I'm sorry, I'm blanking. The young king who turned a king when he was like 8 years old. Josiah, that's it. Josiah. He actually grew up in a pretty bad circumstance. I'm sorry, guys. I have not been.
It's okay. He was really thinking about that baby.
It's the baby, man.
Pregnancy. It's okay. Well, no, Cody, I think what your point is.
Yeah, Jason, take it from me.
That family breakdown and struggles is not a new thing, and I support you on that. We want to say it's a generational thing and that we're slowly declining, but you look back at the time of Isaac with how he treated Jacob and Esau. There was partiality and unfairness that was shown there. If you look at how Laban treated his two daughters, Rebekah and Leah, again, there was partiality and troubles there. And when we see that, then that's really not exhibiting the qualities of God, which are just and fair for each and every one of us. We're all on the same plane with God of how he will treat us with mercy and love and forgiveness and guidance.
Jason, let me throw in here, with this, because I think you're onto something. Do we? And Julie's comment kind of brought this to my mind as well. We have so many people out there that this is not the first generation, but that just suffer with abuse. Be it children and the way they were disciplined, be it in the way husbands treat their wives and the things they say to them. We could just go down a whole laundry list of ways that people have been treated inside of families. And I and we've been talking a lot about parenting lately. And the thing I think we forget as parents is we exercise just so much power over our children and can have the ability to inflict lifelong damage if we're not careful. And so when you start talking about fairness and impartiality and holding that up in the family, boy, if we can get our arms around that and do that and live that way to set that example, that right there is going to help so much inside our families, just living according to those principles. Again, this is why I want to tell those that are out there hurting and their family relationships have been just blown up by stuff through the years. There has to come a point to where everybody says, this is enough. We can't continue this way.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. You got to say stop. And just like we were talking about with Isaac and Jacob and Esau, you say you look on down that generation and you look at Jacob and his sons, and did he not show partiality then also to Joseph and even Benjamin? Maybe later, and I mean maybe that's just my personal call on that, but it was perceived that way by the other brothers because he'd give him Joseph a coat of many colors, and they went to him and said, "Your son, which you loved, this is what's happened." They've perceived it that way. So we have to say, okay, my parents were not perfect people, and maybe they made mistakes. And I'm not thinking of any particular example. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. But I'm just thinking, but if they did something that was wrong, I have a choice to do better with my generation, or I can react to that. And I'm going to say, let's stop it. Okay, let's stop. If it was you were in an abusive relationship, then don't you abuse your kids. But that doesn't give you an excuse not to set any standards. And I mean, and in the same way, if you've seen a husband and wife, as your parents that didn't get along, then learn from that and say, I will not, I will treat my wife reverently. I will treat her with the same love as Christ treated me. And so there is a time that we have to put our foot down and say stop, otherwise we are the abusers. And so this fairness and impartiality in our family is so important. I just wanted to share some personal situation. I have a cousin, which, it won't take you very long talking to me. We have a very big family. My mom had 12 brothers and sisters, so we talk about this. Some I'm not so close to, but there's one cousin who there were certain members of the family always said, but your dad is not your dad. So they treated him differently. And he was his dad, but that's irregardless. And I just want to say that he died last year of a drug overdose. His life was wrecked because of the way he was treated. I have another cousin who parent made it very clear to him they didn't like boys. They only liked girls. And so he grew up his whole life being told all the time he's not liked because he's a boy. And he spent his time in prison. I think he's still there. Yeah. Actually, no, he's not. He committed suicide a couple years ago. So I share that story to say that this is causing damage, and our goals need to be to build a relationship with God within the family. Not make separate, or causing harm and damage and pain.
I think, see, this is where I kind of want to get into this. I really agree with that we have to have God in the family for a standard. Not only just in the family, but in our lives in general for individuals. Because, like I said, no one grows up with a perfect family, but that doesn't necessarily dictate how we will end up. However, it does have influence, so it's not completely without repercussion. The only alleviation to that is like what you're saying, Jason, is that we have to be spiritually minded, and that is we have to go back to what the standard is, because otherwise, without the godly standard and without Jesus' example, we are very reactive. Like you were saying, we become kind of a product of our environment without having something to strive for, some better goodness, some sort of righteousness outside of ourselves. So while we are subject to our environment, we are not necessarily what is the word I'm looking for? We aren't predetermined in that way. We have the individual responsibility to still seek goodness and righteousness within ourselves. It might be hard if we are alone in those situations, like if you're in a family where you don't fit in. I've heard a lot of stories like that where maybe one sibling just is totally different from everyone else in the family. If you ever watch the movie Matilda, it's a good movie that kind of depicts that. But the whole purpose and the whole story of the Bible is that you are accepted and you have a place in heaven, and Jesus is the standard and God is the standard, and if you follow that guide, at the end there's going to be reprieve.
So I'm thinking of a passage in 1 Peter 3, and as we think about practical ways, how can I help myself in my family move toward excellence? What can I do today to begin that process? It doesn't matter if I'm the only one that chooses to do this. And I have a picture of certain family members in mind when I say this, because I've had a few family members through the years that just whatever reason determined that they didn't like me, and I didn't like them, and it created problems. And so how am I going to handle that? Well, this is what God tells me to do. 1 Peter 3:8. All of you be like-minded and sympathetic, love one another, and be compassionate and humble, not paying back evil for evil or insult for insult, but on the contrary, giving a blessing, since you were called for this, so that you may inherit a blessing. For the one who wants to love life and to see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. And let him turn away from evil and do what is good. Let him seek peace and pursue it, because the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do what is evil. This is a great passage, I think, that gives us the beginning baby steps to improve our family relationships, to head toward the goal of spiritual excellence.
Yeah, well, Matt, that verse is challenging. It is humbling, and it is sobering to sit here and think about the qualities that are encompassed there, and that is a process.
Yeah.
And I hope that by the time my kids are out of the house, I've gotten some of that down. I haven't scarred them too bad. I also think that part of having an effective environment on your kids for spiritual excellence is trying to have an environment of supportiveness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I know that seems somewhat like a foo-foo term that and I'm not trying to be overly emotional and sensitive, but I'll just tell you that if you don't have a relationship with your kids to where when things are awkward or strange, you can't talk to them about difficult topics, like their feelings about sex or relationships or even drugs, or if they make those mistakes that they can't come to you and talk through them, then they are talking to somebody. Why not have a relationship with them that they're going to come to you so that you can guide them spiritually? And I think that's a principle that we've neglected from Ephesians chapter 6. When you look at verse 4 in Ephesians chapter 6, where it talks about bringing up your children, what is the next word? In the nurture and admonition of the Lord. The word nurture, to me, carries the thought of being supportive, not just providing the nutrition that they need, all the right answers, but also supporting them, guiding them, living life with them as these decisions are being made. And I want an environment where my kids, the real test is go to them this morning and ask if they could come to me about certain things, and they might say, oh no, there's no way. But I've really tried to have that relationship. And a lot of times I'll be the one to bring up the discussion. They don't want to look at me in the eyes, when you can tell it's getting awkward. But try to have a relationship where it's supportive. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is segueing into a really important sort of epiphany that I just kind of had on the live right now. So Patricia kind of wrote in saying that we grew up in a generation, sort of tying into what Julie was saying, in a generation where we weren't supposed to speak bad of our family, and emotional issues were not taken seriously. Is essentially what she was saying, and then we tie this into what Jim was saying. He said the only perfect parent is God, and he says I'm not him, but the Scripture is full of what makes him ultimate as the parent. So we have the example of God and Jesus as how to be good parents. And then you tied it all together by saying it's relationships. If we have relationships at the forefront, then we will prioritize the emotional needs, the physical needs, and then ultimately the spiritual needs of our family members and of our friends or of our church family. And a scripture that came to mind at this point was when David was hiding in the cave, and he prays, and he was concerned because no one cared for his spirituality. No one cared for his soul. This is Psalms 142. It says, with my voice I cry out to the Lord. With my voice I plead for mercy to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I tell him my troubles. And when my spirit faints within me, you know, Lord, in the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, there is no one who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for my soul. So I cry out to you, Lord. You are my refuge, my portion in the land and of the living. So I think if we're able to understand the paramount importance of how spirituality and our spiritual relationship with one another ties into our existential purpose of what God has given to us, that kind of alleviates a lot of problems by proxy, just by default. When you care for all that, then the other things just kind of fall into place. And I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone.
I think so. Time invested, warmth.
Yeah.
As Jason used the word nurturing, that word just kind of has a certain connotation, right? Mm-hmm. There's a connection. There's the warmth of care and compassion. And when I think of the word nurture, when I used to live out in the Dakotas, I would hike out by this lake. And in fact, I would almost bet you the eagle's nest is still there. I know right where it is up in the top of this big pine tree. And I would hike around this lake and see this eagle up there. And when in the time of year when they would have young eagles in their nest, that mom eagle was flying around and she was talking to me. She did not want me anywhere around. Her job was to protect those babies that she was raising up in that nest. And I would go over to another part and I would watch them circle the lake and get fish and bring it up, and all that. It was so cool to watch. But there's a connection there of nurture, care, protection, keep warm. I see all of that in that. And that's what our young people need to feel.
Exactly.
Right? They need to have one of the biggest problems we face is neglect. Today I'm going to be preaching out of Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Jason, we talked about this before we went on the air. The first part of that verse is, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Do not stir them up to anger, I think is the way the CSB uses it. And one of the ways that happens is just through neglect.
Yeah.
We got a whole generation of people now that don't even know who their father is. Yeah. And they're coming into the world, and a lot of them are just filled with anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matt, we're talking here this morning about trying to raise the bar in our families, to try to aim, keep the aim, not just as fathers or parents, but as a family, an aim to spiritual excellence, and doing better with our relationship with God and such. And I just want to say, none of us have all the answers and stuff that's going to work for your individual family, but anytime that you invest in this and trying to help your child grow in their relationship with God will not be wasted time. And instead of spending your dying years concerned about the souls of your child, knowing that you're going to meet your Maker having done your best, regardless of what their decisions, that has to be a position of peace. And I think of Proverbs chapter 29, verse 15, where it talks about the rod and the reproof give wisdom, but the child left to himself brings shame to his mother. I want to just take the reverse of that and say this. There's nothing more rewarding than when you see your children serving the Lord. And when I mean, sometimes being in worship and having my child sit there and sing beside of me almost brings me to tears, and it has brought me to tears. Having a child leading in prayer and worship, having your child lead singing or work, being so dedicated to the work that they come in early or they're down at the building, to try to help everything get arranged or the sound system turned on or whatever else. Because of their love for the Lord and their dedication to the work, it brings joy to your soul, because you realize they're connecting with God. And so that's what it's about. It is teaching your children to love God.
It is amazing. Your younger son is barely almost 20, and here he is in here at 6:30 on a Sunday morning. At 6:30 on a Sunday morning, running all the AV today, and he looked kind of droopy when he got here, but he does it with a great heart.
Yes,
and
he does. Yeah.
And same for us. I tell Becky sometimes I don't know why my son waited till he moved away to do some of this stuff, but he calls me and he talks about he's teaching a Bible class right now for some of the young people where he is, and boy, you talk about bringing joy to your heart. Yeah. Those are the cool things, and I'll just say this: we got to end. But
yeah, I have one thing before we end, though.
Okay. Well, let me just say this, and then you can wrap it up.
Okay, that's fine.
For those of you who are struggling, we were talking about awkward moments a while ago with your kids and going through that stage with them. My advice would be just push through. Just push through. Endure that. Do your best to try to keep those lines of communication open, and live in such a way that does that. And I tell you, one day it's going to change. They're going to come back to you, and they're going to call you and talk to you, and it's going to be the greatest thing you've ever had. When I see the Zach or Emily the phone pop up, their name pop up on my phone, I mean, I can't wait to answer it. And when they ask me for advice, man, I am there. Yeah. But you got to endure to get to that.
I think how to keep the connection like that open, the lines of communication open with a strong relationship, has to deal with the spirituality focus. And the reason being is because when you are focused on their soul and their eternal destination, it has like this inherent ability for you to see them as the individuals as they are, who they are, them as a person, as a soul, as a creation of God. So you're able to see them as in totality, as opposed to just the culmination of parts, as opposed to just what they do for occupation or what they're doing in school, as opposed to how they act and what they might need and eat and whatever. It has this way of penetrating into the depths of who they are, and then they feel that when we are worried about their eternal outcome, and that's kind of, if anyone has watched The Chosen, that's sort of every time Jesus encounters a new like follower or someone new, that's exactly what is happening. The gravity of him seeing, I see you, I know who you are, and I'm here to help you for your eternal purpose. And I think that's where we need to go with this. Yeah. I'm terribly sorry that didn't come to me until like the program was over, but but I think that's what we're advocating for. So
yeah, it's good.
Well, if your relationship with Christ is what you want, I would I know no better place for you to be this morning than with God's people. If you're ever in the Dayton Centerville area, we hope you stop by the Cornerstone and meet the family here. Our desire is to serve God. We know we're not a perfect people, but we know a perfect God who can make it that way. And so there's a place for you here.
Absolutely. You know, and if you're struggling with your family, I want you to know there's plenty of people here that can rally around you, encourage you, and help you along the way. That's what it's all about. We do life together here. And so I would just come out and be with us today. We'll be here live and in person in about 50 minutes or so for our Bible classes. And then our worship is at 10:45 this morning. We're at 5051 Wilmington Pike here in Centerville. Or, obviously, if you are out of our area, you can watch through live stream this morning. That will be 9:30, and it goes through our whole worship service. So just stay here on Facebook or YouTube or the app or wherever you're watching from this morning. We so appreciate you. Guys, I'll be gone next week.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you guys will handle it well.
Yep.
And I hope you all of you have a great week.
Yep. Well, guys, we're going to see you next week, Lord willing, and that we have a guest speaker other than Matt. So.
All right. God bless.
Order my steps in your word, dear Lord. Lead me, guide me every day. Send your anointing, Father, I pray. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. Oh, Father, humbly I ask thee, teach me your will. While you are working, help me be still. 'Cause Satan is busy, God is real. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. Oh, Father, bridle my tongue, let my words edify. Let the words of my mouth be acceptable in your sight. Take charge of my thoughts both day and night. Order my steps, Lord, order my steps. Please order my steps in your word. I want to walk worthy, want to walk worthy, according to thy will. Please order my steps, please order my steps, Lord, and I'll do your blessed will. The world is ever changing, it keeps changing, but you are still the same. Please order my steps, Lord, I'll praise your name. Order my steps in your word, order my tongue in your word, guide my feet in your word, wash my heart in your word, show me how to walk in your word, show me how to talk in your word. When I need a brand new song to sing, show me how to make your praises ring in your word, in your word. Please order my steps, Lord, order my steps. Please order my steps in your word. I want to walk worthy, want to walk worthy, according to thy will. Please order my steps, please order my steps, Lord, and I'll do your blessed will. The world is ever indeed. He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! Now in heaven glorified. He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! Now in heaven glorified. Jesus, let your kingdom come here. Let your will be done here in us. Jesus, there is no one greater. You alone are Savior. Show the world your love. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven, come. We are children of your mercy, rescued for your glory. We cry, Jesus, set our hearts towards you, that every eye would see you lifted high. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory